The story of Louis XIV begins in a France that looked powerful from the outside, but trembled beneath the surface. It was a kingdom of castles, cathedrals, armies, and ancient noble families, a land that saw itself as one of the great powers of Europe. Yet behind the pageantry of the French crown, authority was fragile. The king's name carried weight, but the kingdom was not fully under his control. Powerful nobles ruled their own regions like smaller kingdoms. Courts plotted, families competed, provinces resisted, and in Paris, the people could still rise in anger. Louis was born in 1638, after years of waiting for a royal heir. To France, his birth felt almost miraculous. He was called Louis Dieudonné, Louis the God-given, because his arrival seemed like a blessing after so much uncertainty. From the moment he entered the world, he was surrounded by expectation. He was not just a child. He was the future of the monarchy. But destiny does not protect a child from fear. When Louis was only 4 years old, his father died, and the little boy became King of France. A crown was placed upon a child who could not yet understand the weight of it. In practice, France was ruled by his mother, Anne of Austria, and her chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin. They governed in his name, while Louis watched from the background, learning silently. And then came the rebellion that would shape his soul. It was called the Fronde, a series of uprisings against royal authority. Nobles, judges, and angry factions challenged the crown. Paris became dangerous. The city that should have honored the king became a place of fear. One night, the royal family was forced to flee. Imagine that image, a child king leaving his own capital under darkness, not in triumph, but in humiliation. The boy who was supposed to embody France was running from Frenchmen. That memory never left him. To others, it was a political crisis. To Louis, it became a lesson carved into his mind. If power is shared, power can be threatened. If nobles are allowed to grow too independent, they will challenge the crown. If the king appears weak, the kingdom will tear itself apart. So Louis learned to hide weakness. He learned patience. He learned control. While Mazarin governed, Louis observed. He watched how people bowed, how they lied, how they flattered, how they betrayed. He studied power not as an idea, but as theater. He began to understand that ruling was not only about issuing commands. It was about making everyone believe that authority was natural, permanent, and unavoidable. In 1661, Cardinal Mazarin died. The court expected the usual process. A new chief minister would be appointed. France would continue to be governed through a powerful advisor, just as it had been for years. Louis refused. He announced that from that moment on, he would rule alone. No chief minister, no rival center of power, no man standing between the king and the state. It was a stunning decision. Many doubted him. He was young, elegant, and surrounded by ceremony. Some thought he lacked the experience to govern directly. They misunderstood him. Louis had waited for this moment his entire life. Now the child who had fled Paris would become the king no one could ignore. Louis understood image better than almost any ruler before him. He did not want to be seen as merely a monarch. He wanted to become the center of political gravity. He chose the sun as his symbol, and the meaning was unmistakable. Just as the planets revolve around the sun, France would revolve around him. Nobles, ministers, soldiers, artists, ambassadors, even foreign kings would look toward Louis as the center of power. He became the Sun King. But the image was only the beginning. Louis transformed daily life into a system of control. His morning rising, the lever, became a formal ritual. His dressing, his meals, his walks, his meetings, all became ceremonies. Nobles competed for the privilege of handing him a shirt, standing near his chair, watching him dine, or speaking to him for a few seconds. What looked like vanity was actually strategy. Louis turned access into currency. The nobles who once threatened royal authority now spent their lives chasing royal attention. They dressed for him, waited for him, performed for him. Instead of building private armies in their provinces, they fought for status in his palace. And that palace became Versailles. At first, Versailles had been a hunting lodge. Under Louis, it became a monument to absolute monarchy. Its size was overwhelming. Its gardens stretched outward in perfect order, nature itself trimmed, measured, and forced into obedience. Its halls glittered with gold. Its ceilings celebrated royal glory. Its mirrors reflected candlelight until the rooms seemed endless. Versailles was not just beautiful. It was political. Every stone said the same thing: power lives here. Louis brought the nobility to Versailles and kept them close. Away from their local power bases, they became dependent on the king. Their lives revolved around court etiquette, favor, rank, and ceremony. They lived in luxury, but also under observation. In Versailles, Louis did not need to destroy the nobles. He domesticated them. While the court sparkled, the machinery of government tightened. Louis expanded the role of intendants, royal officials who carried his authority into the provinces. These men were loyal to the crown, not to local nobles. Through them, Louis could reach deeper into France than earlier kings had managed. Taxation, justice, administration, military organization, all increasingly flowed toward the center. And the center was Louis. He also surrounded himself with talented ministers. Jean-Baptiste Colbert worked to strengthen the economy, encouraging industry, trade, manufacturing, and naval power. France became known for luxury goods, fine textiles, and state-sponsored production. The arts flourished. Painters, musicians, architects, dramatists, and writers found royal support because Louis knew culture was another form of power. A kingdom admired for its beauty was also a kingdom admired for its strength. Under Louis, France became the cultural heart of Europe. French manners, fashion, language, and court style spread far beyond its borders. Other rulers tried to imitate Versailles. Other courts copied French elegance. Louis was not just ruling land. He was shaping taste, identity, and prestige. But power on display demands power in action. Louis wanted France to dominate Europe, and that meant war. Again and again, he sent armies across borders, seeking territory, security, and glory. In the early years, French power seemed unstoppable. His armies were disciplined, his commanders were skilled, his resources were enormous. France expanded, and Louis's reputation grew. He saw war as part of kingship. A great king did not merely inherit borders. He strengthened them, he defended honor, he made enemies respect him. But Europe began to fear him. As France grew stronger, other nations united to contain it. Coalitions formed. The Dutch, the English, the Austrians, the Spanish, and others opposed French expansion at different times. What had once been campaigns of confidence became wars of exhaustion. The cost was immense. Armies required money, fortresses required money, glory required money, and that money came from the kingdom. Taxes rose. The burden fell heavily on ordinary people, peasants, workers, families who would never see the Hall of Mirrors, but paid for the wars and splendor it represented. Then came suffering at home. Bad harvests struck. Hunger spread. Villages struggled. The image of the Sun King remained radiant, but beyond the palace walls, many lived in hardship. This was the contradiction of Louis's reign: breathtaking magnificence at the center, crushing pressure at the edges. Still, Louis did not let the performance fade. He continued the rituals, the ceremonies, the structure of court life. He knew that monarchy depended on belief. If the king appeared uncertain, the entire system could tremble. So he remained controlled, formal, majestic. But time was one enemy he could not command. As Louis aged, his world darkened. The man who had once danced as Apollo, young and dazzling, became an old king surrounded by loss. Death entered his family again and again. His son died. His grandson died. His great-grandson died. The line of succession, once secure, became fragile. The king who had built his life around permanence watched the future become uncertain. And still, he ruled. In his final years, France was exhausted by the War of the Spanish Succession, a long and brutal conflict over who would inherit the Spanish throne. Louis wanted to place his grandson on that throne, extending Bourbon influence. Europe resisted. The war dragged on, draining France further. Victory became survival. Glory became endurance. By the end, Louis had achieved part of what he wanted, but at a terrible price. France remained powerful, but strained. The people were weary. The treasury was burdened. The great king's final years were not filled with easy triumph, but with grief, prayer, and the heavy silence of age. In 1715, after 72 years on the throne, Louis XIV died. 72 years, longer than any major European monarch before or since. He had entered history as a child king fleeing rebellion. He left it as the symbol of absolute monarchy. His reign transformed France. He centralized the state. He humbled the nobility. He turned Versailles into the stage of power. He made France the cultural model of Europe. He expanded royal authority more completely than almost any French king before him. But he also left behind debt, hardship, and a system dangerously dependent on the strength of the crown. The monarchy he elevated to dazzling heights would later struggle under the weight of its own structure. Long after Louis was gone, France would continue moving toward crises that his successors could not control. That is what makes his story so powerful. Louis XIV was not simply a vain king surrounded by gold. He was a ruler shaped by childhood fear, determined never again to be weak. He understood people. He understood symbols. He understood that politics was not just laws and armies, but performance, attention, and belief. He built a world where everyone looked toward him. And for more than 7 decades, they did. The mirrors of Versailles still reflect his ambition. The gardens still show his hunger for order. The palace still speaks in the language he created: grandeur, control, light, authority. But there is another part of the story that matters. Louis did not create his image by accident. He understood the stage, the costume, the music, the silence before he entered a room. He knew that a monarch who appeared ordinary would be treated as ordinary. So he made himself distant, formal, almost untouchable. Every gesture was measured. Every ceremony had meaning. Even his silence could become a command. This is why Versailles mattered so much. It was not just where Louis lived. It was where France learned how to look at power. An ambassador entering those halls did not simply meet a king. He entered a world designed to make resistance feel impossible. The gold, the marble, the gardens, the music, the crowds of nobles waiting for a glance from the king, all of it worked together. It told one story. Louis was order. Louis was France. Louis was the sun around which all else moved. Louis XIV did not merely sit on a throne. He turned the throne into the center of the universe. And even now, centuries later, the image remains. A king dressed in gold. A palace blazing with candlelight. A court holding its breath. And at the center of it all, the Sun King.